Good morning or good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to today's Ipsos webinar. You will notice that we have renamed our series Keys, as we are very keen to give you access to our best resources to open doors on understanding the evolving context that we're all living in. Today, we will take you on a ride on the retail roller coaster. We all know that the way that people shop around the world, and that ourselves, we have all changed our ways of shopping over the past few weeks and months. It's one of the things that has been most impacted by the pandemic and by its consequences. So there are many new aspects to consider, and our experts are going to talk about that. But before diving into this topic, that is today's topic, our Chief Knowledge Officer, Simon, will share a bit of a general update on how the broader context has been evolving over the past few weeks. He's chosen some very good pieces of information, sharing some fresh results from our global surveys. After that, Alison, who is our Global Head of Path to Purchase, will take us on our roller coaster tour of the changes that we're seeing, including the surge of new online shoppers everywhere. And Manuel, who is our Global Head of Neuroscience, will help us understand shoppers rewired. So how can neuroscience help us to map the new ways that we are living the retail experience, and how can we enhance them for our users? And finally, Geeta from our Bangalore office will share some examples from India and also an overall recommendation as a final chat. We will then exchange among each other and ask a few questions. But with this, I will pass on to Simon to kick off our webinar today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And as Jennifer mentions, I've selected 4 topics today for us to have a look at that perhaps seem relevant this day in November. The first one is to look at the US in the wake of the election. The second is perhaps to think about where we all are, wherever we are in the world, in terms of our current mood, thinking particularly about the coronavirus pandemic and its impact on how we feel and what we do. To look ahead, and very tentatively, to look ahead to a world where we may have a vaccine, which may open all sorts of new opportunities compared with the lives that people have been living in recent months. But also to pause and take stock. And we've got a new survey to help us think about this question of what's changed and what hasn't. But to kick off and have a look at the US, we were, in this webinar a month or so ago, we were having a look at the candidates as brands, as if they were brands. And that analysis was reminding us that Biden's lead was rather narrower when we viewed the 2 candidates through the lens of a brand. And what we thought we might do today is have a look at the country as a brand. And I've got a couple of exhibits, if you like, that show, if you like, the current state of play in terms of how the US is seen around the world. The first one is from a study we do called the Nation's Brand Index. People from different countries rate nations around the world, and the US has slipped since last year from 6th place to 10th place. A second study shows people rating the US on 13 different performance areas, and this is people from more than 20 countries around the world. And perhaps what feels striking is just how negative the scores are on some of these categories, for example, contributing to international peace or respecting neighbours and other countries. So the new president has Brand USA in his in-tray. But there's also the local agenda, and many of us on the call, of course, are from America. Those of us who aren't are very interested in what's happening in the country. Our team has pulled together a State of the Nation report on those big topics facing the country. One of the things they particularly draw on is this question about the crisis of trust, trust in information, And it's not just about mistrust in politicians. There's significant levels of distrust in, for example, advertising, or even when we're looking at brands. And it's clearly a big topic for all of us, whatever we're doing, in terms of how we can get our particular messages across. We'll talk about vaccines very specifically in a moment. But this study that we've just launched internationally picks up on that. We're looking at trust, and we're trying to understand where people are around the world. And one of the findings is perhaps a distinction between how comfortable we might feel we are. More than 8 in 10 people around the world say we make sure that the news that we look at comes from trustworthy sources. But when we think of our fellow countrymen and women, we're less sure that they can tell real news from fake news. So I guess, I think it's fair to say it's just as a reminder of the rather complex communications environment in which we are living. Thinking about that environment in which we're living more generally, we wanted to pause and just think about the current mood. Many months into the pandemic, we've got a new piece of research which looks at how people are staying afloat during the crisis, bringing 11 months of data together to help us think about where people are in different parts of the world and where their heads are. One of the things I'd like to share now is this slide here, which asks people to self-assess how they feel they are on a series of categories. Alison's going to pick up on it in a moment in her presentation, but just for now to say that there was a scenario where people perhaps might have been moving through in a logical linear progression towards the famous new normal. But of course, the scenario today is more one of moving backwards into, if you like, the red box, where we are either getting ready for new restrictions or having to react or adapt to, if you like, rather suboptimal ways of living our lives. So for now, we're in that box. Clearly, in the future, we may be in a position where we can move to a more optimistic place, if you like. We're bringing together all of our work on vaccines for those of you who'd like to get into the detail on this topic. But just for now, I thought I'd share with you some findings from our latest international study. On the one hand, it's a very stark and simple finding. 73% say they'd get a COVID vaccine if it were available. Seems clear. But the minute we look into the pages of that research report, we can see that attitudes lie very much on a continuum. We're certainly finding not that many people are strongly saying, I would be front of the queue immediately. Indeed, we're finding even within a 2-month window, people rather less sure about whether they would get the vaccine than they were a couple of months ago. And this is a topic that we've picked up on in a new white paper, where our behavioural scientists remind us that this question of vaccine hesitancy was highlighted last year, before we'd heard of COVID-19, as one of the top 10 global health issues facing the world. So certainly one which we'll all need to watch, and that paper goes into more detail if you'd like to. Now, we still, whether we have a vaccine or not, have to look ahead to this and now what question. I put on the table a voice assistant because our big topic for today is this reinvention of retail. And we've got a new piece of work which looks at voice commerce and asks the question about what needs to happen for take-up to be higher, because it's a piece of technology which has been with us for some time now, but take-up perhaps isn't quite what some people had expected, or indeed some people may have hoped for. So that's one thing that we might look towards the future. Another thing as we look towards the future is around sustainable lives, sustainable brands, sustainable businesses. And we've tried to bring together some new thinking on this very topic, looking at the famous say-do gap of consumers and trying to understand perhaps how we, if you like, can better understand them and better adapt with them. And that's something you can also explore now in a new special website to draw on the particular themes that you're interested in your work. And onto the third category, which is around this question of beyond the pandemic. And I wanted just to finish really by sharing with you Just some headlines from a study that we've done for 7 years now, called Global Trends. We normally do it every 3 years, and we released the 2019 fieldwork earlier this year, but we're back again with a new release from 7 countries. And we felt we needed to be back again because of the huge changes in behavior that we're seeing. And Alison will share some of that in a moment, and Gita and Manuel will pick up on that. But we don't yet know what that's changing in terms of our values and what that means for the medium term. So what our team has done is revisit the 12 trends that they developed in their framework. They've identified that 6 trends are starting to register, let's say, more change perhaps than we might expect over a 1-year period. And I'm just going to share 3 examples now. The first is on the climate emergency. We're certainly seeing that coronavirus has by no means dented climate concern, and that continues to rise, and there continue to be real concerns about our direction of travel. The second one is around healthy living and healthy products, and we're finding health issues, if you like, moving up the consumer agenda quite consistently over time. And then the third one is a really complex one around global and local. On the local side, in the work that we've been doing on coronavirus, for example, it's really reminded us each time we've looked at it about how different countries are. And we're seeing, for example, hugely different responses in attitudes on particular topics over the course of this year. But at the same time, we're also seeing some signs of rekindling in terms of national pride and products from my country. But that doesn't seem to be stopping interest in, let's say, looking outside our country into other parts of the world and what may be happening there. So that kind of global, local dimension, I think, is something we're going to have to be quite nuanced on in our understanding as we move, if you like, into next year. Equally, as we move into next year, we have to be very careful about trying to identify what hasn't changed. And the team have started to do that in this analysis, and on the whole issues around how people feel around tech and data. We're not seeing huge differences, for example, in terms of the broad motivations that people have, for example, in attitudes to how my data is shared. We're often actually quite inconsistent, I think, in having a really detailed view formed on those topics. So more on this survey is available. You can watch the presentation, and I've left the link here, and there's an entire website for you to explore that in more detail. But it's perhaps for the first time in this series of webinars, it feels like we're able to at least tentatively start to look beyond the pandemic. So of course, to be continued, but I hope these remarks have been useful just in setting the scene in terms of where we are, but also in setting the scene for the retail roller coaster that we're going to come on to in a moment. So back to the studio and back to Jennifer in Milan.
Thank you, Simon. That was great to set the scene. And indeed, one of the things that is staying after this first, let's say, wave of the pandemic is definitely the changes in retail. And you mentioned voice commerce earlier, and I'm really delighted to welcome Alison back. She was with us a few months ago to tell us what has changed and what we can expect and what we have to think about. Alison, happy to have you back.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be back. And now we're going to dig in. We've heard this metaphor, the retailer roller coaster, which I just think is a great way to describe what our lives have been like for the last many, many months. And despite Simon's optimism, they're going to continue to be a roller coaster for the coming months. I wish this would be over and we could move on, but this is the world we're in, and we're going to talk about how do we inspire shoppers within this world. A few days ago, Jennifer asked me, how are things different since I was last with this program in April? And there are a few things first that I want to start with that aren't different. We're still fighting the virus. Our economies and retailers are feeling the pain. And e-commerce continues to grow. So some good, some bad. But there are some things that are very different since I was last here in April. The first is this one notion of acceptance. Most of us now accept we are on this very long roller coaster ride. The second is digitalization. It's driving radical change, rapid, radical changes in shopper journeys. We need to embrace that and get ready for that. And the third is chronic anxiety. Shoppers are afraid and they're shaping unpredictable behaviors. And you'll hear Manuel and Gita discuss that following me. So I'm going to refer to this chart, and I want to touch base on it again because it was the inspiration for the retail roller coaster. In April, we were optimistic there would be a new normal, and we were starting to move into that world of being better at e-commerce, maybe shopping more safely. But honestly, most of us just wanted to get back to our regular place and having fun shopping at the mall. The good news is we've adapted. We've learned new safe shopping behaviors. We've got new technology, and we've all embraced e-commerce in ways that should make the coming months a lot easier for us all in terms of shopping and also in terms of supplier and fulfillment. So let's start with what does it feel like to be a retailer today? Most people on this call are not retailers. There are a few, and those of you that are, we know you've had a really challenging year. It's a rocky ride. The safety concerns are forcing all kinds of operational changes. Frugal shoppers are pressuring margins of already fragile retailers. And without a doubt, this is a tipping point for e-commerce, which is a good thing if you're an e-tailer or you're ahead of the game on e-commerce, but it's a challenge if you need to catch up. There's also a shift to new digital payment platforms, third parties that enhance the shopping environment, make it easier for shopping, but bring new competitive frameworks and financial structures to the marketplace. So the bottom line, we need to reinvent at every turn. Shopper journeys are being reinvented too. Massive changes. Here are just a few quotes from our ethnographies of how the journey is different today than it was before this pandemic. And you can read them, but I want to touch upon a couple. We live more simply. We want to stay safe and save money. I shop fewer stores to avoid people. I buy from my list and leave. And my personal pet peeve right now, online shopping is boring. I just find my item, I check my prices, and I check out. So we're shopping differently because we have to, but we're not really satisfied. When we take a look at these massive shifts in online behaviors, of course, e-commerce is growing. That's not really a surprise. But when you take a look at these charts, and they show 2020 weekly sales growth across some leading US retailers. On the left, that top orange line represents Instacart's trends. Instacart is a leading tech platform that delivers groceries and other products from traditional retail or brick and mortar retailers to homes. And when we compare their amazing growth, that big orange line, to the little looking flat lines at the bottom, those are the traditional grocery stores. So all the growth in the industry right now is coming from e-commerce and from third-party tech platforms, creating a challenge for the traditional store. Meanwhile, on the right, these are some top e-commerce players. And you'll notice, by the way, none of them are pure play e-commerce anymore. They're all omnichannel. But you can see that since mid-March, when the pandemic really hit the US, they all started to explode. Amazon actually grew the least on a percent basis because its e-commerce business was already so big, but continued to grow, continue to show week-on-week gains throughout the last 6 months. I want to point out too, on the far right, you see that angle that starts to go up where the data leaves off. That's Amazon Prime Week, Prime Days, 2 or 3 days where Amazon drove the world to their website and to everybody else's. And so it's interesting to see that Amazon's investment is driving shoppers to all their competitors as well. So we're going online, but we're not necessarily happy. In our global trends survey that Simon talked about, there's clearly friction with e-commerce. You can see the numbers across every country but China. Shoppers find it more difficult than shopping in traditional stores, and those numbers continue to grow. We dug deeper and thought maybe this is because there are folks who are not used to e-commerce or not used to shopping online that are getting engaged and are dissatisfied, but it's really everyone. Here's some data from younger shoppers, Generation Z, and you can see they too are dissatisfied. And in fact, in every country except China and Italy, they're more dissatisfied now than they were last year. We could argue that's probably because of fulfillment challenges, but I also think it's because it's pretty boring. So we take a look at who's doing it right, and there is no doubt, and this is hot off the presses. Yesterday was Singles Day in China. That's the day that Alibaba created as the anti-Valentine's Day 10 years ago. That's now the world's largest shopping event. Alibaba talks about this day and the days leading up to it as a mega shopping festival. And amazing. I mean, shopping traffic online peaked at 583,000 orders in a second, 1 second. Nothing's ever been done like that before. $75 billion in sales reporting, and they're still counting. And they've been growing plus 30% a year on Singles Day for 6 years in a row. Take a look at the brands that are key piece of this. Over 100 brands each generated 15 million in the first 111 minutes of this 4-day event. Those brands included Nike, Adidas, Apple, L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, and more. So lots of exciting things drove the business. Concerts on the left, picture Katy Perry's concert. Check out the video on YouTube. On the right, the new Air Jordan that's debuted yesterday. So I want to close here with just 2 more points about technology. Fulfillment, and I've used this word a couple of times. Most of us are marketers and market researchers. I urge you all to be somewhat students of fulfillment. Amazing things are happening here. Amazon and Alibaba are lighting the world on fire with robots in their warehouses and for delivering to stores. And on the right, new players are entering the fulfillment space every day. I'm presently mesmerized with the ideas of Magway and Virgin Hyperloop, where we can put goods and serve people into tubes and transport them faster than ever before, all in a way that is fast, eco-friendly, and safe in every single sense of the word. So it raises the importance of getting it right across the point of purchase system. And thankfully, technology is our friend here too, because we can create virtual environments and test ideas and optimize across the store, at the shelf, on premise, online, and at every channel that matters. So to sum it all up, there's some clear foundations for staying on track. We need to accept and embrace the roller coaster. We need to understand this new omni-channel shopper. If you don't know your new shopper journey, you need to find out now. Reach higher as that digital bar goes up, reach faster, and help shoppers get ready to manage their anxiety. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks a lot, Alison, for that great update of where we are. So definitely things have been moving quite a lot over the past few months. So it's really great to have you tell us about this. So I found it particularly interesting to see that there is a bit of frustration with online shopping, and that even if we dig down and we look at the younger generations, we still see this frustration. But on the other hand, it was interesting, you did mention concerts on this Alibaba Fantastic Singles Day event, right? So how does that work out? There are ways for online to become fun.
Oh, there are so many ways for online to become fun. I mean, just think about how we've changed our business meetings to make video conferences much more fun than phone calls used to be. Retailers and brand marketers could do the same thing with their technology. I mean, I actually think technology makes it easier and more fun because the investment is less, the travel is less, you don't have to build a new store, and you can move faster. So it really we should be ahead of where we are from an experience standpoint.
You did say that online was boring for you as well, right? So
very much.
We need companies to pep things up a little bit for us. Yeah, I think that's a good, a great message. Okay, thanks a lot for now, Alison. And so, Manuel, we've been talking about enjoyment, about fun, about being bored. So all this is what happens in our brain when we shop, right? Can you tell us a bit more about what happens and how we can leverage what happens?
That is correct, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's clear that the shopper experience is an emotional experience, right? This is not about a simple act of acquiring goods and just like buying things. And this is because the retail industry has evolved in this way and continues to evolve, as we were just seeing with this amazing concert with Alibaba, to deliver experiences to shoppers through all these different formats, right, that lead to an emotional payback from the shopping experience itself. So actually, these positive feelings are regulated by 2 key neurotransmitters. Those are dopamine and serotonin. And dopamine in particular plays a key role in the brain's reward system. So this is a system in the brain that activates when we experience something new, something pleasant, but also when we anticipate, when we expect to experience something new, something pleasant. So this is key because then it helps us learn from these positive experiences and reinforce the behavior that led to those positive experiences, developing habits that translate into brand loyalty. So let's see how that works. So yes, as I said, this learning mechanism is heavily regulated by the role of dopamine in the reward system. And you're seeing on the screen two brain structures, the orbitofrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens. And that might not be saying anything to you right now, but let's see what they do. So they're involved in 3 different phases in this whole reward situation, right? The anticipatory phase, that's when you are expecting some pleasure out of a decision. So let's say you're thinking of buying this chocolate bar and you think you're gonna like it a lot. And then the consumatory phase is when you're actually experiencing the outcome of that decision. So you're actually eating the chocolate bar and you happen to like it a whole lot, a lot, even more than you thought. So that's when the interesting part comes. Then there's the updating phase that compares what was expected with what actually happened. And this is key to influence future decisions, right? So in fact, those dopamine neurons fire a lot more when the actual experience is better than it was expected. And that's what leads to learning new behaviors and new habits and leads towards brand loyalty. So that's the key takeaway here, that these repeated behaviors like shopper habits that lead to brand loyalty, they are going to be driven by experiences that are better than we expected. But now, it is fair to say that this whole year, this whole COVID-19 pandemic has been one of the worst collective emotional experiences globally. And what's happened here with all this level of anxiety is that it has significantly disrupted most of the behaviors and the routine activities and the habits that we had as shoppers previously. Someone recently coined the term amygdala hijack to express an immediate and overwhelming, strong emotional experience where the behavioral response is disproportionately stronger than it should be, because these automatic responses are occurring before we put some thinking into it. And what happens with that is that it leads to irrational shopper behaviors, and this produces some immediate relief and some immediate reward, but we'll have little success in settling as actual long-lasting behavior. We're not going to be buying tons and tons of toilet paper forever. So we studied people's behavior across different phases of the pandemics and in different markets, and also evaluating the increasing tensions among the individual desire to go out shopping and to stay home and help control the pandemic. And we saw that preference is not like two ends of the spectrum, but aspects on which individual can hold simultaneous conflicting views, and that this needle would move depending as a function of the phase of the pandemic in which each market was. So this data is from May, and the US at that point was a little earlier on opening before we went back to closing. And you see that other markets were more ready to go shopping when the US was still pretty conflicted. But where are we now? So now we're in a situation in which many of our old normal shopper behaviors and habits no longer apply. They have been unlearned. And shoppers have responded to this new reality, displaying new behaviors, and some of them might be temporary, and some of them might remain and stay with us for a long time. A big part of that is up to us, and it's up to the retail strategy to reinforce certain behaviors that we want the shoppers to keep as a habit and to lead to brand loyalty. So you can see in this chart, for as an example, that this is our global tracker, that shoppers are more nervous about shopping in the store, understandably. And that leads to new behavior like contactless and especially everything around limiting touching. So many other behaviors have changed. And the big point is that this challenging situation, it's obviously a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to train our brains on new behaviors that lead to brand loyalty by creating experiences like full shopper experiences that exceed shoppers' expectations. So I want to leave you with that. This challenge is also an opportunity to train our shoppers' brains on new behaviors. And I'm going to leave you with my colleague Geeta Loba from India, who's going to bring all these ideas into actionable insights for you.
Thanks, Manuel. So what I'll do is I'll bring you back to the kind of challenges retailers are facing. And I'll kind of towards the end also talk about some neuro-based considerations or guidance that we've been able to cull out for you. So, but first I want to show you a couple of stills from sort of a recent sale event in India. This was at a silk sari store in Chennai, India. And you can see really what is happening here. And truly, if you think about this, there can be no better evidence of how hardwired we are as shoppers. And Manuel spoke of this before. Positive experiences reinforce, create that dependence, that need to get back that happiness, the kind of sort of well-being that we get out of shopping. Of course, this created a lot of alarm. The Prime Minister came on television, addressed the nation, nearly brought a lockdown again. But anyway, the stores were shut down, and this kind of helps highlight the kind of challenges for retailers in the new environment in which one is operating. And therefore, when there is compliance with the requirements of the time and there is responsible retailing, what really happens in this environment is many of those feedback loops are closed and short-circuited. And so the emotional payback really doesn't come to shoppers. Like Manuel mentioned, we have been monitoring shopper behavior over this period, and we do know that there has been a substantive change in some of those behaviors, particularly if you think of how they behave within stores. So there is a lot of reluctance interacting with products in store and so on. And if you put this in the context of an environment which was actually engineered around this ability to interact, to touch, feel, the products in store, then you know that the experience is going to be dented substantially. So this is a huge challenge to be solved, and we do know that in the beginning of the lockdown period, there were many other challenges also which retail has been able to solve quite successfully. Out here, what you see is an example from India of a large grocery chain called JioMart, who sort of restored access within a week or so of the lockdown happening by getting a lot of people to order, to do a lot of transactions using existing platforms such as WhatsApp. And this is something that we saw in India over and over again across different sectors. And certainly this is what has happened across countries in the world as well. And to an extent that, within a few weeks of the lockdown, there were also so many informal farm to door kind of services being set up, pretty innovative ways to use available technology. So technology was a good fix for some of the challenges that retail faced. But when it came to experiences, and pretty much retailers tried this sort of same approach, that did not work as much. So you have here some examples that I want to show you of jewelers in India trying to get the experience back to customers through video calls, by getting maybe collections sent to their homes for them to pick and choose from. But none of this actually helped restore that experience. In fact, the previous quarter was one of the lowest sort of sales for that sector. And it wasn't till the stores could reopen again that the sales began to sort of bounce back. And this really brings to focus the challenge. At the heart of it is about restoring experiences, rewiring the setup so that those very experiences can come back again. And from that perspective, if you think of what are the fixes that one needs to consider, then there is a need. Some of these are pretty obvious, that omni-channel is going to be the dominant way going forward, and that seamless interaction between online and offline is going to be of importance. But what is even more important to register is that over the past few decades, when the retail evolved, that it has evolved around providing better and better experiences. But much of that has been engineered around the ability of shoppers to move around, interact, touch, feel objects. Now that sensory weight needs to shift from touch, away from touch, to something like visual. And that process and that design needs to happen at a very fundamental, foundational kind of a level for experience to get restored, for shoppers to once again get that sort of high of anticipating, of enjoying what shopping is all about. Of course, there are call outs for brands in the new environment on how they present on the shelf and on how they actually utilize the space now available on the pack. Perhaps the need to optimize that for the essential information, shifting the load of that information onto technology platforms, using technology such as QR codes and so on. So these were, when we analyzed the situation from sort of a neuroscience perspective, these were some of the salient call outs that we thought of sharing with you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Geeta. I really loved that picture of the saris sale. I would have loved to be there. Not in COVID times, though. It looked so joyful and colorful, and indeed, when you talked a lot about experience, that must have been quite an experience. So yeah, absolutely great. So Geeta, I was wondering, you did touch on your last slide, you did touch briefly on consequences for brands, but I was thinking as I was listening to you, this is really changing things for brands so fast and so much. So any sort of advice that you would like to add in terms of how brands can respond to this fast changing environment?
So Jennifer, we were actually thinking of how in the store, in a situation where shoppers actually don't want to be too long in public spaces, how they are interacting with packs and so on, and what can brands do to present themselves, to present the most important information up and out there, right? And also how things such as planogramming need to be thought from the basic in the sort of new environment. So there are some of the most obvious kind of elements that brands need to account for.
Mm-hmm. Rethink everything in a new light. Sorry, Alison.
That's okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. I think also building on Geeta's thought, we have to think integrated. We have to think about a seamless ecosystem that integrates the store, the phone, the computer experience, the audio experience, the voice box experience into one set of messages that go together. They don't have to be the same execution, but it has to reinforce the same elements of the brand and send the same message to today's shoppers.
Great, thanks. That's a very good addition. So a good discipline and lots of things to think about.
I had a question for Manuel. You talked about the very dramatic, your hijack thing in terms of a kind of a sudden change. How should I think differently if I've got a sales campaign or a marketing initiative in the light of perhaps what we're seeing in these times?
I think what we need to think now is that we are in a very unique moment for adaptive thinking, and it's up to us and to retail strategists to leverage this disruptive moment to build new shopper behaviors and new brand loyalties. Because here's the thing, a lot of our previous behaviors, all our shopping habits, many of them have been unlearned. We're not doing those things anymore. So many contacts that we would do in a mindless way, so without thinking twice, now will require some deliberate thinking, right? But however, our tendency is always to go to more economic cognitive strategy, right? To go into behaviors that we don't have to deploy resources, we don't have to think about. So this is definitely a unique opportunity to leverage our reward system in our brain and to develop new and long-lasting behaviors for our brands.
Okay. So we need to think, yeah.
Behaviors,
So, okay.
behaviors that will probably stick at this point for some time. So I have another question for you, Geeta. Again, thinking about some of the stuff that you were showing us, and my question is: should a conclusion be that technology is really the only answer to face all these retail challenges? I saw that lots of what you talked about goes through technology, and what Alison talked about as well. So is technology the answer? Will we all be super technological and super wired?
So I think to an extent, yes. I mean, technology is like the obvious go-to. And so when we think of technology, it has to be in play. But I think the most essential element is how we deploy that. And that has to be guided by what we are trying to achieve here, what we are trying to fix for, and what we are trying to restore. So the hows have to be figured out before we sort of apply technologies, which is why some of the quick fixes, in my opinion, didn't quite work out. So easy fixes may not be, or fitting in the available technology may not be the way out. I think the element of design, the element of sort of creating those experiences have to guide what kind of technologies we deploy into solving those.
And how about you? Have you become more technological in shopping?
I was just hoping you wouldn't ask that, because I mean I'm such a fan of convenience. Over the lockdown, pretty much everything that I can possibly buy online, I've been buying it online. So you know, I have traded in experience really quickly for convenience. So that's who I am.
Many of us, I think, have been through that.
Exactly. And Manuel, and one of the things that I think many management textbooks over the years, when I've talked about sort of customer loyalty schemes, and technology then came into that, and often perhaps is all very rational. What's your sense, perhaps from your own experience? You're looking, you're wearing a very nice shirt, if I may say so. What happens when you put away your neuroscience books and your neuroscience research and go shopping? And what's the future of perhaps that kind of relationship with the store and with the brands from your perspective when you if you like go outside?
Well, let me tell you that I have like every punch card of every business in Brooklyn and every loyalty program of every business online, because those are like very smart ways to take advantage of what we know about the brain's reward system, right? But you know what, like Alison was talking about online being boring and missing the whole shopper experience. And when I go for clothing, I like to have the whole experience, like, and even if it's after brunch, a lot better, and go try on my clothes and see how they fit, and then try on more clothes. I know that's not possible, unfortunately. So I, like everybody else, had to move towards e-commerce, and it's a gamble because you don't know if it's gonna fit well or not. But with all these loyalty programs and stuff, I'm actually wondering whether once the whole shopper experience is available, whether I will stick with the online or go back to brunch and shop, or a mix of both.
We'll invite you back, so you'll come and tell us in a few months' time. Lovely. Okay, thank you so much, Manuel. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Geeta, from both Simon and I. Thank you to everyone who was with us today following our webinar. And we expect you all back on December 10th for our last webinar of the year, where we will wrap up 2020. Thank you so much, and bye-bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.